hearty and warm welcome to all our panelists who agreed to join us today. Thank you so much. And an equally warm welcome to all of you. I mean, literally warm, since we're sitting here. And this audience is primarily architects, planners, designers, and citizens at large. I will be your host today for this discussion. I'm Smita. Hello. Member IUTI. The discussion today is about envisioning Bengaluru, designing collaborative futures. Joining us for the discussion today is Ms. V. Manjula, IAS Commissioner, Directorate of Urban Land Transport. DULT, as we all know, has made major strides in collaborative planning and implementation strategies for urban mobility at various scales. We were supposed to have somebody from BDA, but they haven't come. We have the Chief Engineer from Smart City Limited, Mr. Ranganathan Nayak, Mr. Shrikant Vishwanathan, CEO, Janagraha Center of Citizenship and Democracy. Welcome. His personal area of expertise is city systems and municipal finance. Mr. Sridhar Pabasetti, Founding Director, Kautilya School of Public Policy at Geetham University. He was formerly CEO of Nama Bengaluru Foundation. Welcome, Sridhar. And we have Champaka Rajagopal, who is member IUDI, urban designer and PhD in public-private partnership. So once again, thank you for being here, and we will start with the discussion today with our first question. This question is about our scale, the scale of urban design. We know that Bangalore has been master planning or has had master plans from 1985. And while the master planning exercise has been happening, we haven't been able to create the kind of lived experiences we would like at a neighborhood or street level. For example, our streets are still not inclusive and accessible for children, elderly, the underprivileged, differently abled people. Likewise, our design at local areas is not very integrative towards urban villages and economically weaker sections. We just fail to plan for them at a local level. So based on our experience in the planning and urban design scale, could you tell us, dear panelists, how should we address this problem of local area planning and design? Okay, so we'll start, because this is an urban design question. I will put Champaka on the spot and let her.
Thank you, Smita. Can you hear me? Why don't you take mine? Thank you, Smita. The question of scale, you know, I thought quite a lot about the question actually previously as well over the years, and essentially the scales at which we've been practicing urban planning and design prior to liberalization of the Indian economy, it was a much more predictable form of governance, where we had national level mandates, schemes and grants that were given to the state government level, and this was then delegated to the local government levels. Whereas now, post-liberalization, the number of actors and the type of actors involved in the decision-making spaces have amplified. And it's not just that they've amplified, but they've also, they interact at multiple scales at the same time. So the smart city is a great example of that, right? So you have municipal governments interacting with other parastatals in a horizontal manner, but you also have the municipal governments interacting with the private sector, with state governments, with national governments, with international organizations. So the state has got rescaled. I think that's an important message that we all must take with us. And in this arrangement of rescaling, over the last so many years, we've been working in an agile manner, because agility is very critical for us to deal with the kinds of challenges that we're facing. But the key question that comes along with this agility, and I want to make this one particular point, that we need to think about collective ownership of public problems. And within that collective ownership, what are the different types of accountabilities ownership, control, and accountabilities of public problems. I think it's very critical to define these in mutually constitutive ways in order for us to be able to deal with the complexities of scale. I think so. It's a rescaled environment. I think that's the core message that I'd like to communicate as someone who's been involved in urban design. And also that urban design is not just design of physical spaces, of course it's design of physical spaces, but it's design of all of these processes and relationships that exist across scales. I think that's where urban design becomes important. It's not just design of places, but it's design of processes and relationships.
Sridhar, could we?
Yeah. I really loved what Champaka was saying. You know, we often get confused with city to be about architecture, concrete, and everything else. But a city is about its people, right? And as Champaka said, it's about looking at the processes and then looking at scales, right? All the things that you mentioned, walkable footpaths, trees, lakes, everything, right, is not a national level problem. It's a very local problem, right? And I'm sure how do we do walkable footpaths? Everyone in this audience will know what needs to be done. The question is, how is it that people who are doing something about the footpaths never even want to come and have a conversation with us, right? So the natural question is, what process can be made wherein 1.3 billion people's views can be taken in and done? Well, you can't, but maybe in a ward, there is something called as a ward committee, and maybe the ward committee can meet often, and maybe a conversation can happen about saying that, you know, how come we are not even getting these basic functionalities right? And then, if you go across the country, you will not have 6 lakh opinions about it, right? You will more or less have similar opinions, or five opinions at best, right? Some could say we need tender show, some could say we need this, some could say we need something else. But essentially, we have stopped listening bottom up. And that's the biggest disservice we have done in an independent nation. The 73rd and 74th Amendment have been around for last 3 decades. And there's probably any single local body or local government which has given due recognition to these governments. We often forget there is a third tier of government which is as legitimate as the second tier and the first tier, right? And it's for us to think and say, you know, why are we not solving something that's obvious, right? What we can see in our hand, we don't need a difficult process to go find the solution. It's just right in front of us. So let's open up and make this process inclusive. I'll give you an example. One of the things that I've fought long and hard is the issue of Bellandur Lake. And we have taken it at every level, going and talking to local politicians, officials, etc. And it's been a commitment of the last 6 years that I've worked on Bellandur Lake. And recently, a few local residents wanted to see what is a DPR that was given by BDA to some vendors. So they went and asked BDA. The BDA said, no, we can't give it to you. Apply under RTI. Now, who is BDA? Let's ask those questions, right? Who is this BDA? Every one of us is a taxpayer. Every one of us here is a voter. If we are not the ultimate paymasters of this so-called three alphabet organization and every other organization in this country, and if I have to go and apply for RTI for somebody who's spending my money, right? So who is legitimate and who is illegitimate in this relationship, right? So let's go back and ask, you don't need new institutions, you don't need new thinking, you don't need global best practices. You just need to listen to ourselves and say, is there a solution to this problem? And if so, why isn't the solution being implemented the way it should be implemented? And locally reconciling this is the best way possible. And if we can make the ward committees work, if we can elect ourselves a local body every 5 years, I think these are the 2 takeaways that I would like all of us to work together. I'm sure there will be many more that will emerge.
Sure, thanks Sridhar. Do we have Madam Manjula online? No? Okay, fine. All right, so we'll wait. So I think it's important. I think what I think both Champaka and Sridhar said very strongly. One is about rescaling, and the second is about local involvement. And I think and the fact that our institutions should be more accessible, perhaps, from that perspective. So to include local inputs, to include local questions, etc. So I'll take the opinion now of Mr. Nayak. Mr. Nayak, I know Smart City has taken a different approach, right? They've taken an area-based approach. So from an area-based approach planning, how have you tackled this issue of local area planning?
Hello. Good afternoon. I am very glad to be with the community of architects, the student of architects. Today I am very surprised to be with you. It is a sudden instructions to participate in this occasion. I am my own hectic duties in my own field. Of course, at the early age of my career, I came to know the importance of architecture for public life, peaceful living, and an harmonious coexistence of human community. I am S. Ranganatha Nayak, Chief Engineer, Public Works Department, Karnataka, presently looking after the Bengaluru Smart City projects. The importance of architecture I didn't understand at the early age of my career, but when I did my M.Tech from IIT Delhi in late 1980s, and I was in close interaction with Jawaharlal Nehru University, having to acquire knowledge about the humanities and social sciences subjects, and having traveling in Chanakyapuri, such planned areas of Delhi or Asiad villages. Later, when I was in my Indian engineering services doing some Northern India projects, also I was in Indian civil services having this presidential house, North Block, South Block, that those areas of parliamentarian, the involvement of architecture in making a good standardized administrative places, I came to know. Of course, though I was a civil engineer, then later I came to know the importance of architecture, that civil engineering and architecture has to work close together, like twin mothers, what you call, or brothers, or what you call as a husband-wife relations. The importance of architecture is not new, it evolved. It is about, say, I can say about 4,000 years old, when Indus Valley civilization, when those people, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, those cities, when they built, they had a planned city of streets, storied buildings, burnt bricks, good sanitation, water supply, common bathing places, all they have. Later, fortification of the cities during different empires, we have found out. An integration of different cultures integrated in the Indian civilization. Now we can see the Mughal architecture, Christianity, Roman and Greek elements have integrated, and today we have found an amalgamation of different entities and ethics into Indian architecture. Human civilization has transformed from tribal society to agrarian village society to today modern, what you call urban industrial society, where the challenges are with you people, so that a planned, peaceful, a rich living has to be there, so that there shall not be no complexity, a easing of the life. Now we have come to an urban India. Why? In Western society, as per their previous calculation, if the population, total population lives in an 40% and above, it is an urban country. Earlier, it was India is the land of villages. About 6 lakhs villages are there in India. Today, fast migration from villages to the urban because of various factors like education, occupation, living with all facilities. Now we are crossing 40% and above. So we are all old society, old towns. India, in Bangalore, the concept is today the future of the cities. This is a multi-occupational, traditional societies we have. We are all some temple societies or something like business society, those towns we have. Now, and it was more clustered. Now it has spread to a satellite formation, expansion with all. Now we are giving to all mobility through four-wheelers or metros. Through that one we are making all kind of facilities. Here the government has to involve the role of architectures in easing the life, in strengthening the life. The future challenges is with urban, so I can restrict,
Yeah.
no?
No, sir. The question was, how is smart city doing that?
No.
Yeah.
So, in historical perspective, I just generalized. In the contextual, contemporary life, yes, a good intervention. Those compact, clustered, old habitation of Bangalore, there are two main clusters from the days of Britishers. One is old Kote, where that care market, what you call around area, much clustered business place. The other one is the cantonment, Shivaji Nagara and those areas where from last centuries people are gathered together, where multiple activities are there, totally congested. We have to easing it. But those are commercial business areas. The business activity has to be strengthened. So there shall be easy mobility. Now easy mobility means now transportation above the surface has to be eased. Below the ground, the communication network, it may be and easing of the life through proper water supply, proper sewerage system, proper power connection, proper this this one, what you call this mobile technology, what called in communication technology has to be strengthened through laying of all cables below the network, below the ground through cables, so there shall not be repetitive digging of the roads, there shall not be any digging of the network for any utilities. So a permanent solution is done in this core area called CBD area, called commercial business districts, where total pan Bangalore or area based Bangalore has a close interaction. Daily we have to move to these areas where basic facilities or business items are available, more congestion, more network. So easing of the Bangalore community, and to have an all regular interaction, we are easing through roads, through all public utilities. In this way, we are strengthening the city future.
And so you're involving designers and architects in the planning of smart cities.
Yes.
Right.
For instance, only 1 minute. We have care market, we have seen. We are totally strengthening it, refurbishing it by involving the architect. There is an adjoining meat market which is giving meat directly or indirectly to the entire city. We are totally now new construction with the involvement of architect. We have seen the planetarium. There we are putting in a good planetarium where international all technical community come and deliver the information. There we do not have, we have involved the architect. Where we have providing the cycle track in those CBD area, we have involved the architect. We have involved architect in providing the landscaping along the road network. So in multiple activities we have involved the architect. So civil engineer as a co-brother, we have involved the architect in our planning and design.
That's excellent. So coming back to the question, Srikanth, can we talk about the design of, I think maybe you could use this, yeah, that's working. So the question was about the scale of urban design and the need for sort of local area improvements based on that understanding of scale. Yeah.
Sure. I think there are two tracks in which we will have to operate to make this come alive during our lifetimes or in the next 3 to 5 years. Many of us here have been persisting with focus on agendas of decentralization, on the 74th Amendment, on actualizing the vision of the 74th Amendment, etc. Due to a variety of political economy factors, it looks like it's going to take time. So even as we persist on medium to long-term solutions, I think it will be useful for us to look at slightly more creative, clever ways to work with what we have, but yet to achieve what we want to achieve, which is essentially more livable neighborhoods with all the attributes that you articulated. So on the long term, I think we believe, based on our work, that there are 4 ingredients to better governed cities or city systems which can lead to better quality of life. One is spatial plans and design standards. Second is finances and staffing, essentially administrative capacities within our municipalities. Third is empowered political leadership, so that your councillor and mayor are empowered enough to truly deliver on collective aspirations of people of the city. And lastly, all of these circumscribed by transparency, accountability, and citizen participation, what Sridhar elaborated on. And for a variety of factors, achieving meaningful progress on each of these areas, even individually, has taken us far longer than it should have. Right? So that appears to be a medium to long-term agenda. We can elaborate on those factors at a later point in time. But where I see an opportunity to deliver on the particular vision of local area plans and livable neighborhoods, I think this community present here holds the key. Currently, in fact, Champaka, Sridhar and I were speaking on the sidelines of this conversation that there is fairly acute lack of trust and siloization between different key players, between unelected political office bearers who are very powerful in the Indian context, elected the political executive, which is essentially a chief minister, ministers, etc. Elected representatives who otherwise should be powerful but in the Indian context are not so powerful, including MLAs. Then you have senior bureaucrats. Then you have the lower bureaucracy. Then you have civil society. You have business. And the perspectives and the incentive structures are not aligning very quickly, resulting in all of these people not talking to each other from a position of trust and collaboration. And I feel the community that can bring these pieces together in meaningful ways is the urban design community.
Thank you.
And the reason I say this is I myself have been educated a little bit more in the last couple of years because we have a group organization called Jana Urban Space Foundation. I have a colleague of mine, Shashank, from there, and an ex-colleague, Prakriti, from there here. In the sense that for the senior bureaucracy, if I may, and for the political executive, every aspect of livability in a city is concrete and steel, is a civil contract, is civil construction. And however, you need a common language. You need a common language in which all these stakeholders can speak. And that common language today doesn't exist. The language that the citizen speaks, a bunch of others can't understand. The language that the politician speaks, others can't understand. So I feel the urban planning and design community in India understands the language being spoken by each of these people, and therefore can serve as the translator. So in the immediate term, one of the hacks, if you can call it that, or one of the clever ways I think we can do this, is by injecting the government system with more urban planners and architects. And we are seeing how Champaka was talking about how smart cities is bringing about a small shift in the narrative. There are more designers, there are more planners getting activated, getting opportunities to work on government projects, right? Different initiatives. So I think we have to build on that and ensure that we inject more urban planners and designers into the government system, so they are able to pull together these stakeholders in a common language. So you understand that if you have to build a park, it's not a civil contract. So to ensure that many of these are imbued adequately with urban planning and urban design sense and sensibility, I don't believe the long-term spatial planning battle of the 20-year master plan for the city is a battle that we are going to win very soon. Because there is in aggregate, there is a shortage of urban planners in India. It is established empirically, right? And many of them work in the private sector and so on. It's going to take time, and a re-education of sorts of various players is required. And I think we shouldn't also be hard on ourselves, because we are a young democracy. We can't hope to run before we can walk. We all may have to come on the same page and start speaking the same language. So this is one hack. The second hack, I think, is I'm beginning to believe that focusing sharply on women and children is going to pay us disproportionate dividends in cities. The reason I'm saying this is, and I've not done any research on it, it's just a hypothesis of mine, and I want to do something over the next 2 years to validate this, is I think that at the local government level, we have a huge opportunity where for the last 25 years, we have between 1/3 and 50% reservation for women leaders, right? On the other hand, a lot of the challenges we see in our cities, if women make choices on our behalf, or you also incorporate women's voices into design and planning of neighborhoods, I think that will benefit a vast proportion of our entire population. Because as caregivers for children and the elderly, as people who are in today's Indian context shouldering disproportionate responsibilities, right, and across the social spectrum.
True.
Even whether you are the urban poor or you are the rich elite, there's a lot that women represent, right, and not just to the extent of 50% of the population that they comprise,
True.
but to a far greater extent. And therefore I think not just women-centric urban planning and design, but also women-led urban planning and design will help a lot. That's the second piece. So I think we have to look at women as catalytic leaders of change, bearing in mind that gender equality is an end in itself, but is also a means to various other factors. Right. I'm fairly sure it will make our footpaths more walkable, it will make the streets safer for children and the elderly. You'll make sure that mobility planning becomes far more sensible and not just linear, things like that. The third thing that I have is, I think, another common thread which can bind this, in some ways the third leg of this catalytic solution, could be health and wellness. Mm-hmm. Right? Health and wellness of families and health and wellness of communities. And this has two parts to it. One is physical health and well-being. Across air pollution, across waterborne diseases, COVID pandemic being the most recent example, mental health, lifestyle diseases. Across these and the other side of the problem, which is the natural environment, the health of the natural environment in the local areas, I think both of these are also common factors with which nobody can disagree.
Right.
These are great unifiers.
True.
So I feel urban planners and designers in the government, women-centric and women-led cities, and a sharp focus on health and wellness, including environment, sustainability, these three together could give us disproportionate results in the next 3 to 5 years. Right. Instead of overly focusing on slightly long-term agendas or on civic infrastructure issues and problem solving, which generally tend to become slightly more divisive. I'm not undermining the importance of that kind of persistence. We'll have to do this simultaneously.
Thanks, Srikanth, for giving us those 3 systemic hacks. Now, if Madam Manjula is there, and she's been a lady working very strongly towards, in fact, these three, she's kind of been able to achieve at an institutional level. So I want to bring in her perspective on local area planning and the urban design scale. Oh, no. Okay, fair enough. We'll move on. So, the next question is about integrated development. What's happening right now is there are planners, designers, architects, there are many stakeholders, and there are many scales. And to complicate it all, now we have missions, programs, projects, and of course the master plan. So all of these, which are happening simultaneously, there is a need to collaborate, and the RWA, the civic society, planners, architects, forever have been crying about collaboration, because these, at the end of the day, these are different perspectives. So I think let's talk about integration. How do we integrate? Maybe if Sridhar, you could give your thoughts.
So at Kautilya, what we believe is it's important to rebalance the role of society, government and business for equitable and regenerative growth. Right? And when we say rebalance the role of society, government and business, we talk about the integrative approach, saying that how can we all talk the same language, right? And in a less adversarial context rather than a collaborative context. And I think a very simple start point would be, can we look at opening up our data, right? Every time you try to get some data from the government, you actually end up getting it as scanned PDFs, right? How many of you have worked with scanned PDFs? Only two? We can take a little more time. Only few of you? You have, right? So we all know what's the problem with scanned PDF, right? You try to run some OCR, right? And when OCD and OCR come together, then it's a disaster, right? You hardly get anything out of it. Then you think, okay, should I sit and type or should I have somebody to sit and type, right? And we are caught in this forever. And then you're not able to leverage something that's already done and run fast forward. You're redoing something that was done already, right? That's on one end when the government loves putting scanned PDF whenever it does. In many other times it doesn't even share that information. When you look at businesses think that, oh, I'm investing 100 rupees and I want to use this only for myself to get competitive advantage. And I see I don't spend any time to see if 10 rupees of this can be set aside and can we create a social good somewhere outside. Is there some social utility of this data that I've captured? Right? And society is always, trying to come together in different scales, in RWA at best, a city-wide federation, a national federation, etc. And trying to make sense of whatever is analyzable and organizable, right? And I think for us, if we can all make a commitment to invest ourselves and look at an approach of sharing knowledge that can make somebody else's contribution to a better society easier, right? Open data platforms exist, right? If we could make our data machine readable, is the first step that we all should do, right? At Kautilya, we are going to commit a lot of resources to make sure that city plans, data from companies that they are willing to share with us to identify social use. We will encourage those things to be put in a sandbox where society can come in and look at very useful ways of building a new future, right? So many wonderful exhibits were there today, which we saw at IUDI showcase. If only the students could have benefited from real data that existed in either of these stakeholders, right? They could have been far more actionable. right? Many times you make an assumption. You do a 2-day survey of your ward and say, okay, maybe the ward composition is like this, right? So let's leapfrog and build an environment of trust, wherein if I can take away personally identifiable information and not make it public, the aggregate information which can be of use for everybody else, can we all benefit and build from that? And that's an integrative approach that we all should take. And mind you, right, I mean, Bengaluru is not a small drop. It's globally relevant city. Just our BBMP budgets are over 10,000 crores a year, right? And sir, Bengaluru Smart City project, Nayak sir, what might be the budget for this year, sir?
It is only 930 crores
Right.
for 5 years.
Right. So another 200 crores from Bengaluru Smart City project for each year, right? And we go and look at any of the B star organization, right? Or B star, BBMP is also there, right? So like that, if you go look around all these organizations and pool up, you might see that we are spending collectively about 50,000 crores on Bengaluru city alone. Now, can't we reimagine the kind of basic services that we are providing in the city? Should people have to go to the High Court to say that there should be no footpaths? And if people lose their life or limb, they should be compensated, right? So I think this collaborative approach is for all of us to build together. As Shrikant said, many of us have been spending a lot of time, many years trying to fight these battles. But I would urge that all of us look at collaborative approaches of making sure that this data is reusable in new contexts, right? And today we are data rich. Each one of us is generating so much data. If we can collaboratively put together a use case and then say, hey, you know what? I walk this road today. These are the 10 footpaths. These are the 10 footpaths that needs fixing. These are the 20 potholes I bumped into. And can we do something about it, right? And I'm sure something can be done the next time around somebody goes through the space. And collectively in 1 year, we could have come up with a pothole map. And every time a commissioner comes into BBMP, one such announcement will be to make Bengaluru pothole free, right? So maybe he can be gifted this document and say, please, here are the list of potholes that you can fix, right? So I think looking at these collaborative approaches will help us move forward. So open data is something that I urge all of us to come together and do it. And if you leapfrog that, then more collaborative structures can come up.
I think just to add to that, I think under Amrut, there is the GIS, they have to now sort of bring all the data on a GIS platform, isn't it? So I think, yes, I totally believe, I'm a strong advocate of open data, that too on GIS platforms, very, very needed for, especially for this community. Champaka, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Thanks, Smita. Still seems to be, can you guys hear me? So, on the question of integration, I think there's one effort that all institutions involved in the space of development have been engaged in, which is to bring about collaboration. I just want to deepen the meaning of collaboration, because we were just discussing, Shrikant, Sridhar and I, before we started this panel, that the time for arm's length engagement with one another is over. The pandemic is a great moment to recognize that. We cannot just expect that, building on what Sridhar just shared, to have these, to make sure that each of us is being able to collaborate through maintaining our own respective responsibilities. That requires that we enter each other's spaces, we penetrate each other's spaces. And so that collaboration now becomes penetration. I think we need to redefine the word collaboration and deepen it. And what does this mean? Just building on to transparency and data, for instance, and also what Shrikant shared in terms of custodianship of the city, right? It is the elected representatives that hold the custodianship of the city. So if the municipal corporation and rural local bodies are the custodians of integration for our urban and rural areas, which are part of the Bangalore metropolitan area, for instance, then in such a context, I will add another dimension to define collaboration, which is contracts, and this could mean formal contracts, informal contracts, and this I'm building upon my own suggestion previously, that we need to shape these relationships of trust, building on Sridhar again, that relationships of trust will then translate into mutual accountabilities. So I'll give an example of what I mean by mutual accountabilities. Solid waste management, right? The municipal corporation is making enormous efforts. We see that on a daily basis to segregate garbage, take them to different kinds of landfills. If we don't segregate garbage at home, then we're not going to be able to support the targets of the municipal corporation. On road networks, ease of mobility. If we don't respect one another and drive our two-wheelers and four-wheelers in ways that pedestrians are safe, or if pedestrians don't use sidewalks even when they're present, then we're not going to be able to support the cause of, or the problem of congestion, for instance. So I think this question of mutual accountabilities is very critical, and that's what I mean by saying that we need to penetrate each other's spaces. And when talking about mutual accountabilities and contracts, it means that we need to make compromises. Compromises not just at the normative and the operative levels of urban planning and design, but at personal levels. I think we absolutely have to make some personal sacrifices in order to bring about change. No sacrifice, no change. That's absolutely a bottom line, I think. A third aspect that I really want to highlight is, as professionals, we need to get rid of jargon and be able to communicate our ideas to everybody very clearly, be able to open up what we really want to say, get rid of the jargon and be able to communicate this very freely to a wider range of people. It's only then what Srikanth highlighted as a key role that urban designers can play that can really come alive. We need to be able to open this up, and I was talking with Himadri Das as well, he's probably here, and he's very good with doing this actually, of communicating very easily to the masses. And that communication is also very critical so that we can jointly build these compromises where we are all collectively working, whether it's businesses or it's the civil society or it's different organizations of the state. All of these entities and institutions are very heterogeneous. The types of relationships are absolutely unsettled, and there are myriad kinds of relationships that we can establish. So we need to work in customized ways to strengthen these relationships and build these mutual accountabilities. And that's what I would say is a response to the question of integration, which we've all been struggling with for so long.
Thanks.
Just to add one more thing. Just taking forward for what Chamka said. At Kautilya, we look at all problems with an interdisciplinary lens. And that's the reason why the admissions for our Masters for Public Policy program is open to all disciplines. Any bachelor's degree you have, we have no problem with that. As long as your focus is to look at a more equitable and transformative future, right? And that's where what Chamka says is important. We don't get stuck in jargons. You don't have to say, oh, you know what, you don't know this standard, right? As if standards have ruled the world, right? Standards have just kind of caught up when all the innovation has plateaued, right? So it's innovations that have led the world, right? So we need to kind of be comfortable in trying to come and learn, right? And I think one skill, if I urge all of us to develop together, is a listening skill, right? Telling, okay, what is the intent of this discord, or what is the intent of this distrust between, what is underlying between the distrust between two institutions, two organizations. Listen to those differences, and then you can come back and reflect on it and say, hey, you know what, the goal is to have walkable footpaths. That's got nothing to do with what these two people are fighting or what these two institutions are fighting, right? So innovatively, how can you kind of break through these age-old traditions, right? I think as a young democracy of 70 years, we can make a fresh start if all of you youngsters can pursue in your career with a confidence saying that, well, in our lifetimes, we'll see much bigger changes than the previous generation has seen, right? And I think that's what we would want you to power ahead, right? And actually, I have a young architect who came and studied river system in Bengaluru as an intern with us, right? And I thank all the faculty of architecture at Dayanand Sagar who believed in this idea that an architect's final year project can be on public policy and architecture, right? So because if you see a drain and it bothers you, if you see a river and it bothers you, if you see foam and froth in the lake and it bothers you, you can do something about it.
Let's not get stuck in the pedagogy, right? Sridhar, that's what you're saying. Yeah, I completely believe. And you know, one group which is missing here who love acronyms, transport planners, right? So I think if Madam Manjula is there now, ma'am, could I request you to come in and talk about both local area planning and the need for integration and how you have achieved it? She's not even connected. Okay. All right. So could I request Srikanth to speak a little bit about the aspect of integration?
I think again, I'll take it on two tracks. One is the long-term, more institutional systemic track. I think the root cause for why we even need integration, because ideally it should all be holistic. You need integration because right now it's divided. And right now it is divided because we're not governing the city as a place. We don't think of the city as a place where each of us as citizens live, work, recreate and so on. But we are able to imagine the country as a place, we're able to imagine the state as a place, which is why the person who governs the country as a place is the boss. And the people who govern the sectors, like the Minister for Roads, the Minister for Water and Sanitation, the Minister for Women and Child Health, and all of them report to the person who governs the place, called the Prime Minister. Similarly, at the state government level, the Chief Minister's role is defined by the place. The state has boundaries, it's a place. Karnataka is a place, and the Chief Minister of Karnataka is the boss. But in the case of a city, the city is a place, but it doesn't have a boss. There is no single person who governs a city, and the city is also not treated as a unit of economy. So you don't measure the economy of Bangalore, you don't know how many jobs are getting created, you don't know, how many migrants came in, how many went, and stuff like that. So, and this is, there are reasons for this. We became a country first, then we organized our states, and having local governments was a late afterthought in the early 90s. So it's going to take time. Our political parties themselves are quite centralized, right? Who will be the chief minister of a large state will be determined by the central, either the Politburo or the parliamentary board of a party, depending on whether you're on the right or the left. But so that's a persistent problem. So the redefinition, the reimagination of the city as a unit of governance, as a unit of economy, but most of all a place, I think is at the root of it, and the planning community can do a lot in articulating that and making that relevant in the politician's mind. That's one. In the more medium and immediate term, I would also basically build on something that Champaka said. And the West has seen a lot of it. A recognition that 21st century complex challenges cannot be fixed by the state alone. Let's acknowledge it. And therefore, as citizens, as businesses, let's not look only to governments. Nowhere in the world are governments alone trying to solve climate change, or gender equality, or water and sanitation. It's happening as collaboratives. But in the Indian context and this present, in the Bengaluru context, we need these partnerships at the neighborhood level. Which means if Bellandur Lake is a problem, we need a Bellandur Lake partnership comprising not just civil society and ward committees, the traditional voices of civil society, but you also need philanthropists in that area, you need business people in that area to come together as well. Academics, etc., to come together in partnerships. I think we've not been that successful yet in forging place-based multi-stakeholder partnerships. Right? So there's no reason why, Bangalore has more than half a dozen billionaires, most if not all of whom are philanthropists. And they donate for a variety of causes all over India. Similarly, we have the world's best minds in entrepreneurship, technology and innovation. I refuse to believe that if the best minds in Bangalore can come together, we can't solve the Bellandur Lake problem. It almost looks silly that we are grappling with the problem of sending human waste and other waste into our water bodies. But this constant tension of viewing that as a problem of accountability between civil society and the state, which is important, which needs to continue, because of really poor state capacities in India, is not going to yield us results, which is a point that Sridhar also made. we'll need to find a mid-path between aggressive confrontation where you seek accountability, point fingers and says, you guys are not doing your job, what are you doing with the city, you need to fix it. And on the other hand, getting co-opted as, consultants who just nod your heads and execute what the state tells you. The mid-path of that is constructive engagement. And that needs serious work. It's not, when you say collaboration, it sounds like an amorphous word, but there's a lot of hard work in giving it form and shape, whether it's legal or otherwise. It needs a lot of serious work to stitch those partnerships, and there are precedents for that. There are precedents for that, I'm sure, even in India to a certain extent in some places, but there are certainly global precedents, both in the developed world and in the developing world, in places like Indonesia, South Africa, etc., where you form those local area partnerships. In some cases, they may be legal and institutional, which means it is a legal entity. In some other cases, it's more a loose federation. But if we don't do this, we will constantly be confronted by adversarial relations and adversarial standpoints. I mean, I could see this BDA, the housing board land lying vacant here, and I was just imagining what this community could do with that land. Right? You take what happened with the BDA complex in Indiranagar. I think it is a legitimate goal to say the BDA complex in Indiranagar is underutilized. It needs to be redeveloped. It needs to be monetized. More jobs can be created. On the other hand, it was a legitimate demand of civil society that you don't cut trees. It was a legitimate concern of civil society that there will be a parking problem. Tell me what you will do with traffic. And what solution did we finally come up with? Okay, let's not do anything about it. Which is a typical, 20th century approach in the Indian civil society and state. Whereas what you should have done is gotten into a partnership and said, okay, what are the like what Sridhar said, what is our common agenda? You want to create jobs, you want to make sure that that land is not wasted, that you rejuvenate that area, you want to make sure there's no traffic, you want to make sure you don't cut trees. This community can solve for it. Yeah. Planners, architects and designers can solve for it if you sit in partnership with contractors and civil society. But we haven't found that institutional mechanism. Right. And we haven't found the need for it.
Right, so this idea of constructive engagement, I wanted Smart City to talk a little bit about the constructive engagement and partnerships at the local level.
So, okay, Yosvetanu, your basic problem issue is integrated growth.
So partnership, integration and partnership at a local level, area level.
Yes. Now, your question is equal to three factors, I can say. Firstly, there shall be a sustainable development. Secondly, an inclusive growth. And third, there shall be an empowerment. These words implies sustainable development. One of the participants, Srikanth, he told there is a budget of availability of resources of say 10,000 crores or 50,000 crores. No. Whatever the resources is there is very scarce resources. It has to come from the citizens' tax payment. It has to be better utilized. So, in a better way, in a planned way, the budget has to be utilized in a rightful path. So, it is not abundant. So, the sustainable development has to be utilizing these resources, which shall be enduring, long-lasting, that implies the planning. Secondly, that inclusive growth where different sectors, different departments, different key personnel has to be involved for better planned development, so that this is the city of 1.5 billion, which is Asia's fastest growing city or one of the world's fastest growing city, where there is more job opportunities, living opportunities. So this inclusive growth, different departments, different sectors has to be involved. Thirdly, that empowerment, that neglected communities, blocks, it may be slums, it may be migrated workers places, that we have to need full care. So ultimately, to integrate all these, Smart City has implied one concept and also an idea into a reality for people-friendly city living, that is Integrated Command Control Center, ICCC. We are placing it functional in BBMP's 5th and 6th floor of the annex building, where 13 departments will be watched and will be given direction through people-friendly approach, say through a mobile. There will be 13 departments now functioning. It will be seen through all 1.5 billion people through their mobile. Say it may be in a solid waste management. Individual house, all Karmacharis or BBMP has to collect the solid and the wet waste from the houses, and it will be monitored through the GPS, and it has to be collected through tonnages to the trucks to the disposal area. It may be BMTC or BRTCS railway, that where at what time that particular bus or this metro will be available in time, or whether it is totally how much passengers are there in individual buses, whether seat availability is there, like this. Police, all crime records, police through cameras, they're all network cameras, it is available, and one can direct though. We have integrated those 13 departments into a common platform through ICCC at
This is
BBMP.
only for the smart city area
No,
or
total,
for all of
to- all 197 wards of the BBMP for 1.5 billion, that 1.5 crore citizens, we are providing that you can download the app and have your all problem. If something road is dug, if it is BWCCP pipe is dug, if it is not corrected, rectified, it can be, the citizen can inform and get the replay. This we are adopting.
So what about
Through
the departments themselves? So if BBMP lays down a road and BWSSB comes and digs it tomorrow, which is usually what happens, how are do they share information now or they don't?
That in the common platform, the citizen, if it is not rectified as I told, through his mobile, particular that says that police 101 or file some number 108, like they can complain. No, well, all this information, one can will get the solution.
So that was not my question. The question was, Smart City will lay down all this infrastructure. Tomorrow, if BWSSB has to do some work over there, right, and usually will they coordinate with all the other departments or will they go and start digging?
Such problem shall not arise at that time. Beginning itself, we are coordinating, that shall not problem. In those 3 CBD area where Smart City is doing the work.
Okay.
Huh.
Okay.
Already,
That's good to know, sir.
already we are coordinating with BWSSB or BSNL or some other Reliance or this one OFC cables, such all
So for the
we
Smart
have
City, it is all
those
coordinated.
area.
That's good. Yeah, right, understood. Okay, great. So,
Point to make.
yeah, sorry,
Just to
Champaka. Yeah, please.
build on what Sridhar as well as Shrikant were sharing, that when we're speaking about these relationships that are built at the level of actually operationalizing some of the visions that we have at a macro level, one thing that we must also remember is, of course, we're forging collaborative relationships, but these collaborative relationships are also steeped in risk. And if risk can be maintained at the center of these relationships, because these risks translate into environmental risks, litigation risks, it could be other kinds of financial risks, right? All of these hurdles basically translate into risk. And where do these hurdles come up from? I build on what Sridhar was saying right at the start of this discussion, that when these institutions that are not necessarily completely aligned in their goals, when we're working together, then there's obviously going to be a space of struggle. And so we may have private sector companies involved and their motivations are profit making. The state agencies are geared towards building towards achieving their public purpose goals. And the society has its own agendas as well for better quality of life. But among the society members, there's those some with the NIMBYist attitude, not in my backyard kind of an attitude, but you may also have a whole range of others that are really, do not even have access to basic services, right? So there's a huge heterogeneity there. And across all of these sectors, when collaborations are forged, whether it's for Belapur Lake or any other place, if risk can be maintained at the center of all decisions that are taken, because now we are in an era of risks. I think it's just important to keep that as a constant factor as well when we are forging these collaborations.
Absolutely. So, I think we heard a lot of thoughts about integration, and I think we'll move forward into one of the things, and I think Shrikant pointed out quite well, is the involvement of the local community. I think we all have in various, even in colleges, we try and understand how to involve the local community. But fair amount of effort has been made at a policy level to draft it out as public participation. It's part of our law, it's part of our policy, but it fails to be implemented on the ground. So how do we institutionalize involvement, and especially for the underrepresented and not so powerful, right? It is easy to get, for us to represent ourselves, but I think economically weaker sections, differently abled, old, can't just make it, and they're not so savvy with technology to put in their comments on app-based platforms. So how do we involve them? How do we institutionalize this? What form or shape do we need to give? Yeah, Sridhar?
An interesting start, of course there will be many structured approaches, ward committee, app and everything else. But I think the biggest incentive for somebody to collaborate with anybody else is to get the objective done. If somebody comes to me and says, can we plant blooming trees, right? And if I have the authority, and if I say, yeah, let's do it, right? And then he comes back the next year and says, let's put 40,000 blooming trees, right? And if the system enables that, right, then you have a blooming city, right? And this is not a hypothetical example. If any of you thought this is a hypothetical mind experiment, this is what this city is all about. This is the rich tradition of this city. If you're seeing all the blooming flowers, this was done 40, 50 years ago, right? So the only way the children and the women and the elderly will participate in this process is when you listen and do what they say. The question is for all of us to say, when you go to your parents, there are youngsters here, and you ask something, right, which is probably right in your mind, and if they don't grant it to you, then probably the last time you're going to go back and ask something that you think is rightfully yours, right? And I think that's what the city is all about. The city is about people who have chosen to call this their city, right? World over, the most livable city and the most innovative cities are those who fight to get the best talent to come and make it their home, right? Shouldn't Bengaluru be such a thriving city?
We already have the best talent.
We have, right? We have, but are they happy? The question for all of us is to say, when I know how to make the city have walkable footpaths, but I can't do it, and I break my leg and I go to the court, right? So there's something that's broken. Why can't we kind of create these very, very holistic cycles of listen, do, repeat, right? I think if we can make 1.5 crore listen, do, repeat cycles happen in this city, you will see only proud Bengalurians, right? And as Shrikant was saying, Bilandur Lake should not take 40 years for us to solve, right? So I think let's all have that projection to the future and say, how would I like to celebrate the largest water body in Bengaluru city? 916 acres of lake. How should Bairamangala Lake be, which is in the next neighborhood? It's an important source of water to Kaveri. Again, 800 acres of lake. And many times we feel scared to kind of repeat these statistics, because I hope somebody is not imagining a different future of having a lakeview apartment in this 900 acres and say once existed Belanduru Lake. Right. So I think it's a listen, do, repeat cycle. Listen, do, repeat cycle that we have to strengthen, and that's where we all believe that we need to increase the number of public problem solvers, right? And if we do that, then we will build a great nation. We'll build a great city. Right? Thank you.
I certainly endorse the premise of public problem solving, and that also is another layer that gets added on to the scale question that we discussed right up front. Because actually, if we can start looking at public problems as a way of, addressing the many issues we see on a day-to-day basis. We have congestion, we have local flooding, for example. If we pick up any of these public problems as an urban design question, then what that means in addressing the problem, what that means is basically to bring a whole range of agile organizational structures, to design a whole range of organizational structures that are very agile. And they need not, it won't be, for example, you'll have representation from multiple government departments, you'll have representation from different kinds of civil society organizations that come together in forming an organizational setup which is not necessarily one that will become permanent and become yet another rigid organization which sort of consolidates itself over time, and then you are struggling to find means to have that organization sort of perpetuate itself, generate revenues for that organization. So we don't need to really all the time work. We have all the legislation that we need to solve our public problems. So we actually need to create these agile organizational structures through collaborative means and address these public problems.
Right. So I think the question comes down to implementation strategies, right? I think, yeah, so Shrikant, could you also talk about the aspect of inclusionary decision making as an institutionalized process?
See, it's a particularly intractable problem in India on participatory governance. Again, several fairly wicked systemic factors which are inhibiting it. At the root of it is the fact that city is not governed as a place, and the degrees of decentralization have pretty much remained static, if not in some ways regressed over time. So we will need more creative approaches. And therefore we'll have to look at particular stakeholder groups who we think will matter to politicians. Because it's politicians at the state level who are not devolving powers to politicians at the city level. And there are inherent party hierarchies which are also at play, because a councillor is an aspiring MLA, right? Whereas in other parts of the world, if you're a councillor, you'll want to become a mayor and then the president of the country. And if you're an empowered Bangalore, mayor of Bangalore, there's no reason why you shouldn't aspire to become the Prime Minister of India, right? It's one of the 3 premier cities in the country. So this is an intractable problem, and therefore I think testing out what we've already tried again and again will be insanity. Even if you activate ward committees, I think, and we ourselves at Janagraha will advocate for ward committees, we will persist. But even if you activate ward committees, if the councillor who's coming to the ward committee is not himself or herself empowered, then not much is going to get done. So I feel some of the interesting approaches, I just read in the paper today that 1/3 of the candidates put up by 3 political parties in Kerala for the assembly elections are from local governments. They've held positions in panchayats or in municipalities. It's taken them 25 years. It's taken them 25 years of systematic decentralization in Kerala, not just of political power, but also of finances, to get here. And I've heard even one of the architects of this decentralization, Mr. S.M. Vijayanand, say the same thing, that there's a lot of demand, not just for members of panchayats or members of local self-government, but also women members of self-help groups. One of the most successful models of self-help groups in India is that of the Kudumbashree program in Kerala, right, which began as a way of collective mobilization of urban poor women, giving them financial security, livelihoods, etc. But it went into much more. During COVID, they were at the forefront. And eventually, apparently, there's a lot of demand for women from Kudumbashree to stand as candidates for panchayat elections and municipal elections. The point I'm getting at is we have to look at models like self-help groups, also evolving rapidly in urban Odisha, right? And perhaps in few other states. I'm not familiar with them. I'm familiar with Kerala and Odisha as two examples. So we have to look at these models of participation alongside what committees.
Deep democracy is what you're talking about, if I understand.
Deepening of
correctly.
democracy, but not just through constitutional means. I think we can't get stuck with the 74th Amendment.
No, I was talking about deep democratic networks which are not institutional.
Which are getting organized, may not be for civic issues. They're getting mobilized for other reasons. But they're becoming very powerful. See, though he didn't follow it up in implementation, what made Biju Patnaik announce that 1/3 of the seats for the last assembly elections will be reserved for women? He didn't follow it up. Apparently, I read an article which said only 19% eventually happened. But it's huge. And I feel in some ways, which is why I keep saying, women are an electoral bloc which nobody will and can ignore. And many of the SHGs are actually women-focused SHGs. If you focus on, and you spoke about also equitable platforms that focus on, on minorities and on, underprivileged, which is why they focus on urban poor women and SHGs, right? I think we should ride on that. We need to find clever ways, and we need to mobilize around causes which really resonate for people. So we need to go beyond the narrative of civic infrastructure and civic infrastructure related problem solving and achieve that through other means. The ends remain the same, but the means and the narrative building and the messaging will have to be different. So people see that this is connected to the political process, that there is a demand for it. If I don't deliver on it, it could be a threat to my election. Or if I deliver on it, I could get a large number of votes from people who belong to this particular, category or type. So we'll have to be clever and look at that, which is where I feel the gender bloc in India can do a lot, right? Which is why I'm beginning to believe that gender is a huge catalyst of change, transformative change in cities. The agendas of gender, and two others I will add to it, but again, gender can actually circumscribe those, is climate change and water and sanitation. And I'm clubbing climate change and water and sanitation and calling it health and wellness. These are catalytic agendas. Politicians are beginning to talk about them. Politicians are beginning to see that this is going to affect their lives and their own future. And they are experiencing it in the cities that they live.
Right. So, okay, please.
I just wanted to also quickly add, I think another important intervention that's really needed is to have municipal budgets go hand in hand with public processes. And I give the example of Musren Bang in Indonesia, where they've beautifully institutionalized this. They've worked very hard on this. So basically what happens is the mayor of the city initiates the Musren Bang every year. And so you have and I've attended these workshops. They're really very effective. So you start with the public workshop, get people to provide their inputs on what they need for their respective localities. And then the municipal, so the BAPIDA, which is the municipal corporation, they organize these workshops. And then so the municipal corporation, which is the BAPIDA, they build their first set of projects based on inputs that are received. So it goes hand in hand, It's the Musren Bang workshops and then the budget. Musren Bang second round of workshops, the budget. It's brilliant. So I think what we really need to do is to build collaboration side by side, and the calendaring of these have to go alongside across the annual budgetary cycle. It's a brilliant process that we can emulate, I think.
Sweta, I will,
please.
Your issue is that involvement of urban poor or neglected communities in developmental approach. Development today is not in a one way implemented through bureaucrats or by the state and participant or users are simply take the things for granted. No, there is a strict monitoring suggestions by the citizens. My work is not just monitored by Ministry of Urban and Housing Affairs, New Delhi. It is daily monitored by CM Office, top bureaucrats, developmental commissioner, administrator, commissioner, and my own AMD, not just bureaucrats. But all the recipient citizens, if it is not people friendly, they have a stiff opposition, they have owned pressure groups, local MLA or corporators or even small vendor, small keepers. Say Krishnaraja market, KR market, we all take all kind of home vegetables through that place. It caters to the individual houses through different stages. When I am going for renovation of this one, they all have a steep opposition. According to their needs, the work has to be done. So we have not neglected them. We can't neglect them. And if we neglect, the project will not be implemented.
Do you take their feedback, sir? How do you take their feedback?
Yes. Whatever. First is involvement of urban planners. We have involved in planning multiple refinement to the requirement of MLA or vendors and this one. During implementation also, rehabilitation. During the course of execution, they have to be rehabilitated temporarily to the temporary sheds. So at that time, different their apprehensions will be there, wrong ideas will be there. So these clarifications will give, and temporary rehabilitation sets will make, or available places will make, and then we will reconstruct Indian shops. It may be a 10 by 10 shops or 10 by 12 to their requirement, and all this hygienic what the necessity and requirement of lift for public or goods, and then toilets for women, gents, and then third, our children and this. So making cleanliness, easiness, all we are involving it, but one way it is not going to be implemented.
So just one question, because you're from the government, so I have one question for you. Did you actually ask the people there what they want?
At the planning stage itself, we have social sector, we have social welfare sector people, officials in it. We have a health revenue on this one, and we have all kind of interaction with the vendors, what the government wanted to and what their necessity. These feedbacks we had taken.
Okay.
And even say Kabban Park. A Kabban Park, we are refining it through. Say now you can go and see there is some granite water harvesting, proper drainage facility, that footpath, jogging track, multiple chairs and this one, multiple herbal plants, drainage, water ponds and this one. So all elites, all publics who are utilize that park, their requirement in different ways we have incorporated into the Kabban Park, and we are redeveloping it.
Yeah,
Kabban
good
Park.
to know. That's very good to know.
Smita, if I could just add something, I had this amazing conversation with Marshall Gans, who's a professor of politics at Harvard Kennedy. This is about 6 years ago. And he was telling me about, how is political will or political mobilization done? And he says, Sridhar, it's about going to every vote and asking them, are you with X or are you with Y? That's one conversation you could have. Or rather going to a listening process of saying that, what do you want? Right? That's an evergreen option that's there for any new political startup to make. Right? Kudos to Biju Patnaik if he has moved the needle from 10% of women representation to 19%, right? Yeah. But that space is there for any new political upstart or startup to move from 19% to 50%, right? That's very much on the table for the political process to change in terms of decision making, right? And it's always continuous thing for us to look at saying that how do we open up and make these spaces bigger. About 8 years ago, when I was in my previous academic life at IIM Bangalore, we started a program called as India Women in Leadership, where we took 50 women for a 50-day program across 3 cities, Bengaluru, Delhi and Singapore, right? And all those interactions, we realized that the people who are in third tier of governance they are so, they find it, getting a MLA ticket to be such a big thing. It's a 1,000-mile journey for them, right? They have no, they are not even scared whether they'll win the next municipal election or not. That's like cakewalk, right? I mean, either they'll win or they'll lose. Not a big deal. But getting a MLA ticket is like going to moon.
Right.
Right? So these are things that for all of us to legitimately ask, saying that shouldn't that be a natural progression? And I think you've given me a good idea to write a book on, and I think I'll work on it. You know, are we bubbling up political leaders? Right? When Nehru could go from being a mayor of Allahabad to be the Prime Minister of India, right? In how many have we regressed in the last 70 years? That's for all of us to think about. Thank you.
Very true. So I just want one last question, Aruna. I know we're running out of time. Yeah, lunchtime. All of us are hungry. So one desirable outcome for Bengaluru, your vision of Bengaluru, to keep it simple, okay? Since you've come here, it's a loaded word. Put it as loaded or simple as you imagine. So we can start like this.
Okay, so I'll just say collective, building collective visions and collective accountabilities.
I mean, I would only use a modified Gandhi's talisman. I would say you will always see a little young boy or a girl in the street, right? Just go ask him, what is a city that you want to live when you are 25-year-old, right? And I'm sure he's not going to ask for huge things. He's going to talk of something that's what we also wanted when we were 5-6-year-old children, right? We would want more trees. We would want more playgrounds, right? We would want more parks. We would want lakes, right? And I think it's for us to see that in the last 20 years, in the name of development, have we stopped dreaming these things? Can we not dream of another Lal Bagh? Can't we not dream of such well-kept lakes like Balanduru Lake without having to pour concrete into it, right? So how can we look at these natural systems to kind of become realities? By looking at our own past. We don't have to learn from anybody else's past. We got power almost 115 years ago, right? We got piped water supply much ahead of many other cities. So what is that big vision that's common public good for all of us?
Okay. Thanks, Sridhar. Sir, would you give your vision? Lulu, what's...
Simple, only one word, I am optimistic, positivistic. Nothing to worry about the uncertainties, because people are telling about 74th Amendment, women are empowering, they are participating powerfully. 70 years of democracy, yes. 7 decades of planned development. It was Planning Commission, Niti Aayog, or functioning of the government, the state is highly monitored by the judiciary. Reckless behavior or functioning of the bureaucrat is past. So everybody is duty bound, cautious, and about the future city, future Bangalore. Thank you.
You're okay with phrases? You wanted a single word, or just recollect?
Lend your own creativity. This is a creative bunch here. Yeah.
No. So, recognize there is a problem. Work with urgency. Be patient with results. Be ambitious. Work on neighborhoods. Own your neighborhood and act in your neighborhood. Forge partnerships in and for your neighborhood.
Great. So, thank you everybody for being here. for the panel discussion. And do you have any questions or your own vision to share, or we can move on to lunch? Would you like to talk to the panelists?
I will not be available.
Okay, done, sir. Any question on any of the from any of the panelists? They're all hungry, so I think we can wind up. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today's a working day for you, sir?
Every day,
Every day.
24 hours, we are working.
Of course. Thank you so much, sir.
These are your photo.
Yeah, okay.
Remember it.
I will take the photo. No problem. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for coming. So we're taking photographs. We're taking photographs in here. Thank you so much. We are taking photographs which will be mailed to you, sir. I know, lift the dog.